All right, so we're going to continue with trigonometric functions, and this week we're going to talk about specific properties of trig functions. So like other functions, one thing we're concerned about is the domain and the range. For the trig functions, sine and cosine both have the domain of all real numbers, and their range are only the values between -1 and +1. Tangent and secant both have a domain that are all real numbers except odd multiples of pi over 2. So you can't have pi over 2 or 3 pi over 2 or 5 pi over 2 or 7 pi over 2 or any odd number times pi over 2. The range for tangent, again, all real numbers. The domain for cotangent, very similar. It just can't be a multiple of pi. So we can't have pi or 2 pi or 3 pi or 4 pi or 5 pi or anything times pi. The range, just like tangent, is all real numbers. Secant has a domain just like tangent, all real numbers except odd multiples of pi over 2. The secant could be any value less than -1 or equal to -1 or greater than or equal to +1. For cosecant, the domain, just like cotangent, all real numbers that are not integer multiples of pi. And the range would be any value less than or equal to -1 or greater than +1. One of the interesting properties of the trigonometric functions are the fact that they're periodic, because the output values repeat after certain multiples of input values. For instance, sine and cosine both repeat after periods of 2 pi. So every time we add or subtract 2 pi from sine or cosine, we get the exact same value as we would get if we didn't add 2 pi. And that fact is actually going to help us along with the other periodic properties of the trig functions. As stated in the previous slide, sine and cosine have that periodic property of 2 pi. For tangent and cotangent, it is just pi. And for secant and cosecant, it again is 2 pi. Basically what that means is once we know all of the values for sine, cosine, secant, or cosecant over an interval with the length of 2 pi, we know all of their values. And for tangent and cotangent, if we know all of their values over an interval of pi, we know all of the values of tangent and cotangent. And here's how we're going to use that. So finding the exact value using the periodic property of the trig functions. So find the exact value of 17 pi over 4. Sine of 17 pi over 4. Well, we know that because of its periodic nature, sine of 17 pi over 4 is going to be the same as if I subtract 2 pi. And if I subtract 2 pi, 17 pi over 4 minus 8 pi over 4 would be 9 pi over 4. That is still more than 2 pi. So I'm going to subtract another 2 pi, which is the same as 8 pi over 4. And I'm going to get the sign of pi over 4. And if I look at my unit circle, I can figure out what sine pi over 4 is. It's the square root of 2 over 2. That would be my answer. It's a little bit easier with the second example, cosine of 5 pi. Again, cosine repeats its values every 2 pi intervals. So I would like to get that angle in between 0 and 2 pi. So I could subtract 2 pi twice, or I could subtract a total of 4 pi to get cosine at pi. Cosine at pi is -1. For tangent, the period is pi units. So I want to take 5 pi over 4 and subtract to try to get this less than pi. So if I subtract 1 pi, which is 4 pi over 4, I get tangent at 5 minus 4 is 1 pi over 4. Tangent at 1 pi over 4, or just pi over 4, is equal to 1. So we can add or subtract the amount of that period that we were shown on the previous slide. And I'll go back to that really quick. So for sine, cosine, secant, and cotangent, we would be adding or subtracting multiples of 2 pi. And for tangent and cotangent, we would be adding or subtracting multiples of pi. And that's what this whole assignment is going to do. There are no planned meetings this week, no video classes this week. So your assignment will be on Schoology. If you have questions, please email me or send me a message for Schoology, and I will reply to that as soon as I can. Good luck on your homework. Have a great day.